Kia ora. This is a video where I'm going to talk about the books that I read in May. So I read 5 books and I started a few other ones, but I didn't finish it. These are the stories that I finished. So first, I read Beowulf, which is an Old English poem about Beowulf, our hero, and I thought this one's good, but it's more good for like historical context and how it influenced Tolkien, and also its place in the English canon. I think that this translation, it's difficult to make the old prose really sing in English, and I think that this translation is, whilst good, it doesn't really capture the magic of the language in the original, even though I haven't read the original, but that's why I hear. It's a good translation. It's a verse translation. I thought so I've said I thought it was decent, but we'll move on to the next one. I read Faust Part 1 by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. This one is very, very good. I think if you can read German, you should definitely read this if you're into books. I think the translation is pretty good, but it's difficult to really capture the language yet again. I think this is a good translation, but I find that at times the sentences were a little stilted, but there were really good poetic devices used. There's some really clear imagery, and it's got a nice trajectory of tragedy, and it's a very archetypical story, but a very well executed deal with the devil style scenario. I recommend it, and it's also just like a very canonical work, so it's alluded to a decent amount. So it's good, but it doesn't sing the way that I feel the original does. And then I read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is just a great book. If you can read English, you should probably read The Hobbit. Doesn't matter what age you are. It's something that appeals to everyone. There might be some people who sort of bounce off the fantasy side of things. I know not everyone's into fantasy, and this is a very quintessential fantasy series. But I see it as like, a cornerstone of English literature. The world that Tolkien created, whilst it didn't create the high fantasy genre, it definitely was a seminal work in that genre, and this is sort of the beginning of Tolkien's greater Middle Earth, and it's a good work. At times it is a little more whimsical than serious, but there are a lot of really like powerful imagery, and Tolkien has a great command over the English language. So big recommend on The Hobbit. I read Inferno by Dante. This is a very good translation. It's the Robin Kirkpatrick translation. I think I've heard people talk about this one, and I've heard someone who knew someone who was Italian who had read both this translation and the original, and that person said it was a good translation. So it is. I didn't like a lot of this is commentary, and a lot of this book is commentary and introduction. The actual poem itself is not that long. It's a decent length for a poem, but it's not a long work. Let's think. So I didn't read this whole volume, but I read all of Inferno. And I think if you're interested in the classics, especially sort of the medieval classics, this is one of the quintessential classics that came out of the medieval or late medieval period. It's very much in line with the classics from antiquity. So, yeah, it's also just a very, very referenced work. If you're interested in Dante, I'd say Inferno is essential reading, and the other two, Purgatorio and Paradiso, whilst not being, yeah, they're not essential. They're more for completionists, and they're referenced a bit in literature, but less in pop culture. Whereas this one is very heavily referenced, and it's good. But yeah, there is a bit of a content warning. I don't quite know how to describe it, but it's pretty full on, and it's not a story for everyone. So yeah, that's Inferno. And then the last thing, which I made a YouTube video about, was Labyrinths by Jorge Luis Borges. He's like, these are all short stories, and then there's a few essays and parables at the end. He's definitely a master of the short form story. Not like in the way that Chekhov is, where he doesn't really it's not like there's a clear story, but it's the ideas. He's very much presenting like philosophical and metaphysical and a lot of like literary ideas, and it's, you know, those ideas that make this an enduring work or collection of works. So I definitely want to read more Borges, but for now, like, this is the Penguin Essentials, and it's very cheap, and I recommend reading it. It's very good. It's a very good read. So yeah, those are the 5 books that not the 5 books, but the 5 stories that I finished in the month of May. So there are a few other things that I read, but I didn't read them to completion, so I'm not gonna talk about them right now. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.